Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Conscious Corner. I'm really so excited about today's episode, not only because I'm joined by two legal professionals I admire deeply, but because we're talking about something that often gets overlooked in the legal profession, which is how we take care of ourselves. Today, I'm joined by Deena Betze and Bruce Matez, two of South Jersey's most respected family law professionals. Deena focuses much of her work on collaborative divorce, while Bruce brings decades of expertise in mediation and alternative dispute resolution. Both are known for their legal acumen, yes, but even more so for the presence, calm, and clarity they bring to highly emotional, high stakes work. And that's no accident. In our prep call, they both shared something that really struck me, and that's their ability to support clients, navigate complex family dynamics, and obtain great outcomes in the cases they handle. And it's directly tied to their own personal wellness practices, whether it's meditation, yoga, or another way of grounding themselves. They've learned that if they're not taking care of themselves, the work, be it the collaborative process, ADR, or mediation, simply doesn't work. And then often that's what causes things to escalate to litigation. This episode isn't about clients, it's about us as attorneys, how we stay centered, and how we regulate ourselves in the heat of conflict, and how mindfulness can be a game changer, not just for burning out or for avoiding burning out, but for doing the work in a way that feels good and sustainable. So with that, let's dive in. Deena, I'd love to begin with you and to explore what first drew you to family law and how has your why evolved over the course of your career?
It's interesting. My original forays into family law were not by choice because I was a young attorney and I was told take these cases. However, my background prior to law school was in psychology, and I think the idea of interpersonal dynamics and family issues has just always been something I've been drawn to. Um, I now view my practice, which is exclusively family law, as a way of helping people navigate these really difficult, traumatic experiences in their lives. And to me, that's the most interesting and fulfilling, but also challenging thing that I can do as an attorney. I've certainly early in my career tried other things, but kept coming back to this area. I think that's just sort of where my heart is.
Mm. Yeah, and I think your heart, and just from my brief period of practicing family law and having clerked in family court, I think your heart has to really be in it because it is a really difficult area to practice. And I'm sure that you've seen so much in the time that you worked in this field. Are there certain experiences, certain cases that you've handled that have shaped your approach in the work that you do today?
Definitely. Yeah, and there are many attorneys who have said to who say to those of us who practice in family law, I could never do what you do, but I personally could never just sit in a room and just look at contracts all day. That would be mind numbing to me. Although family law touches on every area of the law, and certainly there's plenty of calculations and contracts and agreements and things like that. But yeah, it's the family dynamics that I'm drawn to, and so the cases that have impacted me the most have probably been really there's a couple really horrendous custody cases that I've handled in my career, both in litigation, not collaborative or mediated, unfortunately. And I've seen what the adversarial process of the court system can do, which basically is destroy families.
Mm.
And I, as a parent, as a divorced parent, I want to protect children in this process, and there are ways to do that,
Mhm, mhm.
especially mostly by keeping them out of litigation. So that absolutely has shaped what I do,
Yeah,
and going through that, which is traumatic for the attorney as well. you
yeah,
know But especially traumatic for the family and the children who often don't have a voice in those processes.
Yeah.
Usually they don't. Um, and seeing that and being a part of that and trying to, to help people navigate that has made it just so clear to me that there's a way to protect families. Families, couples that divorce are still a family, especially if they have children. They're a
Mhm.
divorced family, but they're still a family. As I tell my clients all the time, you have to deal with this person the rest of your life. And in fact, you have to communicate with them now on a much higher level than you did when you were in an intact marriage.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
just said, I'll be here, you go there. Now you have to, consult and plan and give advance notice and do all these things. So there has to be a way, and there is a way to teach parents how to do that, how to communicate on that higher level, and to help parents put the children first and protect them through the process so they don't
Mhm.
suffer the negative impact that we associate with children of divorce. So that has become more of my calling, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's beautiful. And I think to your point, as attorneys, we can take on the emotionally charged nature of the cases that we handle and what's coming up for the people that we're representing. And I think where I got a bit spooked or where I said, "Oh, I don't know if I can handle this." I love children. I have three of my own. And when I was actually working, interning during law school at the firm where you both used to work, I very much thought that family law was about looking out for the child and that we were doing it as a group. And what came up often in what I saw in some of the cases that I assisted you on and what I saw when I clerked in in family court is a lot of times the parents aren't aligned and they become almost like the children that are just combating with each other. And I had a hard time kind of working through that. I felt like I took on such of the emotional weight of the cases. And so I said, this may not be an area that's for me, but it takes a special type of attorney who can manage the emotions and the thoughts and what's coming up within us as attorneys, but also what's coming up for our clients. So, so really, really commend you in the work that you're doing. And I'm curious, Bruce, how did you fall in? I don't know if it was falling or you chose
Well,
to go into family law, and then how did you eventually shift your focus to exclusively being mediation and ADR?
so like Dina, it happened to me. I didn't actually choose it early on. Um, I clerked for a judge who was in the family court for part of my clerkship and then the criminal court for part. So I had this dual, clerkship. When I got my first job, the two attorneys I worked for did not want to practice family law, and they just handed all their family law cases over to me.
Mm,
So, among a lot of other things that I did, that was one of the primary focuses of my first job. So, for the first 10 years of my practice, I was doing probably 50% family law and 50% a whole lot of other things. Um, then the opportunity came upon me to join the firm that Dina was at and focus exclusively on family law. And I really enjoyed it. I did not really enjoy all the other areas that I was practicing in. Um, they weren't as meaningful to me as family law. And um, I think part of it is sort of what you guys were just talking about, that there is probably no other area of the law that touches people's lives in the same way that family law does, and it touches everybody. It's not just the the couple that's getting divorced, because if they have kids, it impacts their children and it can impact their grandchildren. It can have impact for generations.
yeah.
Um, it impacts people's friends. It impacts their extended family. You have
I've seen it affect pets.
it could
For
affect pets, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Um,
it's all encompassing.
if you think about like a couple that's been married for 20 or 25 years, they're ingrained in each other's families a lot. And then all of a sudden that family is sort of not part of their life anymore, and that has a significant emotional impact on people. It impacts people's jobs, their coworkers. It impacts teachers and doctors and coaches. It's the breadth of the impact of divorce is so expansive, and I find that very interesting. I find it very compelling, quite frankly. And that's why I ended up focusing my practice on family law ultimately. And how I got into mediation is really very simple. Very early in my career, I just recognized that the court system is not well equipped to really address the the real issues in the divorce. And the reality for me, as I saw it, is divorce is not necessarily a legal problem. It's a personal problem.
Yeah.
And it's an issue of how do we separate their lives, especially if people have kids. How do we separate their lives but allow them to continue to parent children, raise their children together in some type of a cooperative co-parenting relationship? How do we divide the assets and make sure that there's enough money for everybody to be able to live a reasonably comfortable lifestyle going forward? Um, those are based on legal concepts, but it's really problem solving.
Hmm.
And I just felt the court system wasn't well equipped to do it. Um, we have we don't have enough judges. We have judges who don't want to be part of the family court process. They hate being assigned to the family court. We have judges who come into family court often having never practiced divorce or family law, so they don't really understand any of the concepts or any of the ideas that are going on there. And then often, by the time they really learn and get good at what they're doing, they get um, transferred into the criminal court or the civil court, and they're no longer doing divorce and family law cases. So I just felt the system is not good. And I thought there needed to be a better way to do it. And I learned about mediation. I took the mediation course. Um, I was probably in practice about 7 or 8 years. And I just kind of fell in love with the concept of mediation. And took me a long time to grow that part of the practice.
Hmm.
Now I'm doing it pretty much full time.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point about the court system, just from my experience and having been a litigator, civil litigator for 2 decades, there's sometimes it can feel very transactional
Mhm.
and it doesn't always feel fair, but there's also a human touch factor that I feel like is missing. And that's something that really special attorneys like both of you can bring in to the process, and you can help the clients to feel supported when maybe you're not feeling that sense of support in what is might very well be one of the most traumatic experiences of a lifetime. So I know we've spoken offline about what helps you to really show up for the people that you help, for the work that you do. And I know mindfulness is a piece of that support for you both. So I'm curious to hear how mindfulness influences the way you both show up within the work that you do, be it the collaborative work or mediation.
Well, I've taken two long-term mindfulness mediation courses in the last probably 15 years. And then I've done a whole lot of other workshops and things. And I just found that it helped me tremendously in various ways. Probably one of the most important ways is to learn how to leave my clients' problems at the office,
Mm,
not take them home with me, and not let them keep me up at night, and not let me worrying about um, because I think as family lawyers we do that a lot. We take on our clients' problems, we take on these issues, we internalize them, um, and learning how to not do that, and learning how to let them go and understand that this is my job, it's my career, but it's not my life,
mm,
and it's their lives.
Right.
And so I do a lot of deep breathing and sort of just finding ways to settle myself during the day, especially for mediation. I'm a big proponent, and when I teach mediation, I talk about the need for people to take 10 or 15 minutes before they start and clear their mind, center themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to go from one thing to another, which is something the lawyers do very, often. We go from one task to another, from one case to another,
Yeah.
without often giving ourselves a break. Part of that is the culture of billing, eh,
Yes. Yeah.
that infiltrates virtually everything we do. So I think it's really important to just, you know, clear your mind. I don't want to take, if I'm representing you and I'm representing Deena and I'm dealing with your case for an hour and a half, and then all of a sudden I have a phone call with Deena. I don't want to be carrying your case into, what I'm dealing with Deena.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to, get that cleared head, sort of like calmness. And it's really, really important for a mediator to remain calm, centered, clear-headed, and focused on the people that I'm working with at that moment in time, not worrying about what else is, happening behind me, or what happened an hour ago or 20 minutes ago, or what might be happening an hour from now, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, what you're describing is really the power of the mind that, to your point about our mind and that clear seeing, that we can get so caught up in what we have to do, what we want to accomplish, or we could think back to where we could have done something differently, that we're missing out on what's here right now. I do think that some attorneys get a little maybe there's a misconception that we have to get rid of all of our thoughts and like be like a blank slate in order to be centered. And that can be a huge undertaking, because I think as lawyers, our minds are just full at any given moment. So
Yeah.
I like to I like to point out that, like, look, you don't have to reprogram your mind, but we want to get intimate with our own minds, and we want to notice how full they are, and how often we're not aware of how pushed and pulled we get by our thoughts. So back to what you were saying, Bruce, I think giving ourselves that space, whether it's 15 minutes, 10 minutes, even 5 minutes, to just check in on ourselves and to notice where our attention is, not having to get rid of our worries, not having to zap away our regrets, but to notice how they're affecting us. Because when we're
Yep.
not aware of that, then we go into a mediation and we're fully reactive. We're not able to focus our attention where we want it to go. But with that awareness piece, that space that we give us to ourselves to actually become aware of what's coming up within us, that's what allows us to choose how we want to show up for a mediation, for an ADR, for our collaborative clients. So I like to clarify that, but I also really respect how you draw boundaries for yourself. I think that we are often conditioned to be on autopilot, to carry our work home with us, to be strategizing when we're out to dinner, to be taking calls, and to be looking at our calendars and figuring out when we can bill more, to be aware of that and to draw. It's not that we don't care about our work and we're distancing ourselves from what it is we care about and want to do a good job on, but there's a real importance in giving ourselves our time so that we can recharge, so that we can recenter. And when we go back to all the caring that we do and the strategizing, that we can be fully present and aware and centered.
Well,
Great.
I think being present is like another. You just mentioned it. That, how can you really be present for your family, for your spouse, for your partner, for a friend or somebody, if you're constantly, if what you're doing with your clients is infiltrating that, and
Yeah.
that's where mindfulness and things like that can really help. Um, and then the other part of it simply is that we're human beings, and you can't just eliminate everything from your mind at one time. Human beings can't really do that. I know that there are people who are very good at compartmentalizing. Um, at the same time, I'm not sure that they're that good at compartmentalizing. And so, just as human beings, I don't want to bring my stuff
Yeah.
into my client meetings or into the courtroom or into a mediation session. I
Mhm.
want to make sure that my stuff is not causing me to not be able to be present um, for the people I'm working with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's,
think it's important to remember that we are that right, and our clients don't always view us as human beings. And we live in this world now that's really evolved since I started practicing, in the 90s, 100 years ago. To there's no there. Our clients don't have any boundaries necessarily. We have
yeah.
to teach them those boundaries.
Hmm.
Part of my self-care, besides doing things like I practice yoga, and I like to make sure I get some sort of physical workout in, if not daily, at least 4 or 5 days a week, so that I that helps me just be more centered. But right, creating, you almost have to create your boundaries for yourself as
Yeah.
well. For self-care, you have to carve out that time for yourself. As I've gotten older, I've gotten better at that. As the practice has evolved, as I was about to say, into this sort of 24-hour accessibility idea
Hmm.
of, well, you have your phone, which is a computer right there. And if somebody's gonna I know a lot of attorneys text with their clients. I really try to never do that. I'll email. You can
Yeah.
email me. I know it's the same thing on my phone, but I just don't want you to have that level of, if somebody's texting me, they know that I've seen the text. Whereas an email is like, well, if it's after hours, I may or may not look at that email. But
Yeah.
they have to understand that I have to have a life,
Yeah.
that I have to have my some private time, to so that my cup is not so full that I don't have anything left in it for you when it's time to be there for you as the client.
Yeah. I think the truth of the matter is, although, I mean, sometimes you get an attorney who has a dual degree or training, but we're attorneys and you're trained in family law, but you become therapists in addition because you're dealing with so many emotions and the nature of the work that you do is so emotionally charged. We often talk about empathetic distress that we feel. We very much feel what our clients feel. And it's really easy if we don't create these boundaries for ourselves that we can get swept up in their suffering. So back to your point, to both of your points about being human, that it's helpful to acknowledge this. It's helpful to offer ourselves as the attorneys a sense of compassion for what it is we're going through and to give ourselves permission to create those boundaries, to step out of doing mode, and to notice when we're getting emotionally charged or there's some type of psychological sign that the issues in our cases are wearing on us. Do you ever notice, do you have ways, like a little flag that goes up, or maybe you notice from having worked side by side for so long, do you notice in one another like, oh, Bruce, you're getting kind of fired up, or Deena, you seem a little bit off, or are there
Well,
signs that you
I
notice?
I think, well, well, Bruce and I have known each other pretty much our whole lives since we were like in high school. So, so it's, and one of the things that, that's great about our practice is that, I'm working with close friends who I admire Bruce's, practice and ethics so much. And I can rely on him as absolutely as my red flag. I can't even tell you how often I'll show him something or tell him something and be like, can you talk me off the ledge here? And is this insane? You
Mm-hmm.
know, or is this too much? Or am I too aggressive? And we've done that with each other forever, and with our other partners. And it's so helpful and so beneficial. And sometimes I'll just be like, can you just give me a reality test here?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I'm hearing myself or I'm hearing this other person and it's making me react this way. And am I just being reactive? And is this about me, or am I am I crazy here? So that's really and it happens all the time. And that's the beauty of having partners
Yeah.
that you can, and I have such a high level of trust
Hmm.
in that I can, really, there's many, many, many times when we help each other in that way, and we joke around in the office about the difference between mediation Bruce and litigation Bruce. Two completely different people. And I'm the same way, and it's just, it's very interesting how we're able to approach cases that are alternative dispute resolution outside of court cases.
Hmm.
And the other thing that's great about the collaborative process, which is really, really cool, is that we have a coach in the process with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And the coach not only monitors all this stuff that comes up for the spouses, but the
Hmm.
coach also works with the collaborative attorneys. So we have a meeting before the settlement conference, and we also have a meeting after.
Yeah.
And in real time, the coach will say, Deena, you were advocating a little bit too hard in that way, in a more of a litigation sense, and you were, and you need to back off on this thing, or you need to, you know, and you were, you had a high level of reactivity, or this or that, and really
Yeah.
giving us real time feedback like that, and that is such a great tool.
That is.
Yes.
That's essentially with mindfulness, it's we often say that we can kind of like become an observer of ourselves and we can notice reactivity, we can notice the
Yeah.
story. But to have an actual live person coach who can serve that role, that's a gem right there.
It is. That's one of my favorite parts of that of collaborative, is that the coach is there for us as well as for the divorcing
Right.
spouses.
Which is very much needed, I think, in
Yeah, it's
how we do
definitely
things.
needed.
Yeah.
It's a paradigm shift from advocating in the litigation sense to advocating for a client who's making their own decisions,
Hmm.
and taking charge of their own process, in a collaborative case, and it's a constant work in progress. So that's been invaluable to me.
Courtney, I think one of the things that's interesting about what's happened in the practice of law in the last probably 10 years is the emergence of peer groups, people who meet regularly kind of like to vent. I have a problem with a case. I have a problem with an adversary. I have an issue with a mediation that I'm dealing with. And you get an opportunity to talk to other professionals and get some feedback and maybe ways to help handle this thing, which is something that I think was just not heard of, 15, 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Having somebody that you trust that you can vent to,
Hmm.
um, when you're reaching that level of I need to vent,
Hmm.
I need to get it out, I think is very helpful and very effective. And then sometimes when you get it out, then you have the opportunity to do that mindfulness work, the deep breathing, kind of recenter yourself. But it's hard to do that sometimes when you're in the throes of it. Uh,
Yeah.
so I think it's really important to have those peers or mentors who you can do the kinds of things that Deena was just talking about. That we've been very lucky that we've been able to do that also with our partner Gary over the years, and we had a partner Mary Kay. We all were able to sort of just talk to each other about things that come up, and help or calm ourselves down and things, and also in the way that we communicate in writing with other people.
Hmm.
It's good to, I think Deena hit on this a little bit, which is having somebody read the letter before it goes out to our adversary or even to a
Yeah.
client.
Yeah.
Is it too strong? Should I tone it down? Am I being too emotional? That kind of stuff. I I've been saying this for years. I read letters from lawyers constantly who go on the attack unnecessarily.
Hmm.
Often they attack not just my client, but me in a
Yeah.
letter, and there's no reason for it. It doesn't need to be. But if they had somebody read that letter, they might have been able to help them tone it down. Maybe if they had some more mindfulness and find ways to relax their minds and center themselves, they would have written that letter differently.
Well, I think that sometimes, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the attorneys sometimes take on the persona or the flavor or the tone of their clients, and it just
Oh,
carries
yes.
through. And
Yep.
if they're not mindful of that, if they're not aware, then I think it's just a recipe for more reactivity. You kind of add more fuel to the fire.
So true.
Yeah,
And
that's the
that
hard one.
and that leads me to that other point that I was going to make, which is there's another party who has feelings. And I think that's an area in family law that most family lawyers don't ever really recognize, is that there's somebody else who has feelings that are very different than my client's feelings.
Yeah.
And being able to have, what did you call it? Empathetic distress. Being able to have that for the other spouse, for the other party, for the other parent, having some empathy for the fact that that person may be suffering from severe anxiety, or
Hmm.
um, or maybe, maybe my client cheated, and that person is suffering from a lot of anger and trust issues, and um, understanding that those things take time for people to work through, even though they have to work through their divorce at the same time, and it's hard to manage all of that. So just recognizing those emotions are there, on or other issues. There may be some psychological issues on the other side that are interfering with what's going on. So being able
Yeah.
to recognize that stuff can be so important and so helpful.
There,
That's one of the benefits of these types of practices of mediation and collaborative. And the court system's not equipped to get into any of that and isn't going to.
yeah.
It's not. It's just not. But in these kinds of practices, that's one of the first things we do. We talk about what are your goals and what are your fears to the spouses, and really get into what is driving them. Because what I've found is once you find that out, then you can really get into problem solving. You can't solve the problem until you know what it's about. And it's never about what it's about. It's not about fighting over this, particular object. That's never what it's about. There's
Yeah.
other stuff going on. And until you get to that, you really can't get people to do the hard work. They're in their lizard brain, right? They're fight or flight, and they
Hmm.
can't do this high concept stuff. And neither can the attorneys if they get into it. If the attorneys fall into that trap, and now the attorneys are in that mode, they can't do the high level problem solving that needs to be done.
Right. Right. I do remember just the volume as a law clerk, and when motion day on Fridays, I don't know if the system is still set up the same way, where Fridays it was all motion and
Yep.
hearings, and there you didn't have the time. The volume was so heavy that it was very surface level. And so the bedside manner that could be there, it didn't exist exactly. It was just like, we got to get through this. It's a Friday, and depending on what the judge had scheduled for that weekend, I mean, that more personal touch wasn't necessarily there. And I don't want to say you're a number, but in many ways you are just a number. Where I think with what you're both doing, there's a lot more care, there's a lot more attention, being connected with emotions and offering support through the process, which can make a world difference in how you experience something that is in many ways like a loss. A loss, but that doesn't have to be, there doesn't have to be, it's difficult, it's not roses and rainbows, but we can take away so many extra layers of suffering that I think are created either A, by ourselves. I don't want to say us as lawyers, but the litigants, the divorcing spouses, that's created by the contentiousness that can develop between the attorneys, and the insensitivity that is there, not maybe intentional, but the court system, they just don't have the means because of the volume to give people the attention that they very much need. And Bruce, back to what you were saying with emotional distress or empathetic distress, with mindfulness, it almost seems counterintuitive, especially in the type of work that you're both dealing with. But we talk about this idea, not even an idea, this practice of fierce compassion. both for ourselves and towards others, which a wife who's maybe divorcing a husband and has all these horrible feelings towards him, or vice versa, the last thing they're maybe thinking about is compassion. But when we can turn towards the strong emotions that very much are present in dissolution of a marriage, and divorce, and what comes up for not only ourselves but our children, turning towards that with a sense of kindness and compassion, not only towards ourselves but towards our soon-to-be exes, can change the way things unfold. And when attorneys can practice that, it changes the dynamics between one attorney and another, and it trickles down. It trickles in every which direction. So that can be really powerful. And just getting back to the emails, because this hits home for me, because I can't tell you how many times I would get something from an attorney would send me something, and then it would suck me in, and I would get down to their level and be so fired up and reactive that there were times where I hit send and I was thinking, oh, I shouldn't, why did I, oh, I should have waited. I should have taken a walk around the block.
Yep.
We've all been there. We've all gotten that in that situation.
Yeah. So there, I mean, I teach multi-week programs on mindful communication. It's different than the way that we're used to speaking and listening to others, but it's also dropping down and speaking and listening to ourselves more deeply, and to connect with, how does this feel? Like, how's it landing? And to have each other, like you were saying, Deena, Bruce, can you take a look at this? And Bruce, you share
Yeah.
something. Deena, we can strengthen that radar, that inner resource, that ability to discern what's maybe going to serve us and maybe what's not going to help us out in our case. We can strengthen that with practice and with understanding some of our communication patterns, which I think some attorneys, they just are completely unaware of how aggressive they come across, but we can catch ourselves. And we maybe can't control how the other attorney is working, but what we can control, when we're a mediator, when we're a collaborative divorce attorney, we can really control how we're showing up, and we can see that we have powerful inner resources to respond in really skillful ways that serve us, serve our clients, and it can help us to avoid some of that reactive mess that we otherwise are prone to fall into.
It's a practice, just like yoga. It's a practice.
It's a practice.
Right. You're never perfect.
No,
Yeah.
no, but
I mean, getting that immediate feedback that I was talking about has taught me a lot, but I'm still I mean, I'm a human being, and I'm a very emotional person, and I'm reactive. So one of my practices that I try to abide by most of the time, but not always, is to, all right, I wrote this down. I wrote down this response. I'm going to sit on it, put it away, do something else, come back to it, show it to Bruce, show it to Gary, whatever. And I'm just going to wait on that. I'm going to wait. I'm not even showing it to the client yet, because I'm like, my head's exploding and I don't want to react emotionally. And, it's not my job as a divorce attorney, even in a litigation case, to fan the flames and make the fight worse. My job is to get my client through this as quickly and inexpensively and painlessly as possible. None of those things are going to happen. It's not going to be inexpensive or painless or necessarily quick, but I want to make it as much as I can and as efficient as I can, so that I have a happy client at the end of it, who thinks that there was value. And taking care of myself in that process is part of it, and recognizing, wow, I'm really reacting here. I'm really angry. What's causing this? And just taking that moment, just take that little moment. Don't hit send. Don't, fire it off yet.
Courtney, you were talking before about your clerkship and what you
Yeah.
learned and the volume, um, and the fact that there just wasn't often enough time in the day. And it just occurred to me as you were saying this, that, imagine a world where judges could be mindful, and they can't, because they don't have the time, because our system is so overburdened right now. But if judges actually had the time to be mindful, and really think through some of this stuff, in a more mindful way. Maybe take, 5 minutes between
Yeah.
motions on a Friday morning and not go, I remember back in the day, I never wanted to be, I wanted to be first, on a motion Friday, because I
Yeah.
wanted that judge fresh. And, I don't want to have the judge carrying on the BS that happened in the last 7 cases into my case,
Yeah.
especially some judges in
Yes.
particular who really, you could see their tolerance waning as the day
Mhm.
went on, from the first case to the third to the fourth to the seventh to the eighth, on a Friday morning. So, I think back. I worked for a judge. When I think back on how brilliant he really was and the way that he did things, it sometimes astonishes me. Every Thursday night, I would go to his house with all the motions prepped. Sometimes there were 30 or 40 of them. And
Yeah.
we would spend hours talking about them. We'd have dinner.
Wow.
His wife would make us dinner, and we would sit in his living room or in the kitchen at the table and talk through because he wanted to make sure that he got it right and that he understood all of the. And I think to myself, like, now that I think about it, like, he was really mindful about the way that he approached Fried Emotions, because
Yeah.
he really took the time to understand what was going on and to try to find a way to make the right decision, which, I don't think judges today do, and I don't think they probably can do it.
Yeah, I think that something needs to shift just in the internal, like the infrastructure of that's for part two of our discussion, but that I think something needs to shift so that there can be that sense of slowing down, that judges can give themselves permission. To your point, Bruce, you don't need 50 or 30 or even 20 minutes, but 5 minutes, just 5 minutes to sprinkle in here or there can make all the difference in helping you to step out of reactivity and to find a bit more calm.
How about 20 breaths? Just, 20 breaths
Yeah.
takes what,
Not even,
seconds to a minute?
we
Just get up, take a walk. If I'm working from home, which I've done a lot of this summer, I'll get up and walk the dog.
not even,
It's just the best.
yeah, the breath, three relaxing sighs, scientific research shows that just taking
Yeah.
three relaxing
Yeah.
sighs can incline the body and mind in the direction of more ease.
It's interesting,
Yeah.
though. I would be willing to bet they do not even remotely teach something like that in judicial college to judges,
No.
No,
which
but
should.
there is some encouragement and hope. I've been actually in collaboration with a handful of judges. I'm looking to ramp up more attention on the importance of mindfulness and supporting judges who I think sometimes people think because they're on the bench and they're the ones who are calling the shots that they have it easier in some way than dealing with what it is attorneys are handling. And from having spoken to so many judges over the years, and especially in the work that I do from the mindfulness perspective, there's so much stress and anxiety. And when you have someone who is making decisions in in cases that profoundly alter the lives of not, as you, going back to what we started off with, not just the two people who are having to go through divorce, but their families, their friends, their pets. It's a lot. It's a lot to carry, a lot of weight to
High
carry.
stakes.
Yes.
Very high stakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am hopeful, and even if I can just plant one small or a few seeds and have them flourish and grow in the judicial system, that's always a good thing. So I want to share with listeners how they can stay in touch with your work, or if they're going through difficult time in their relationship, they're curious to learn more about how you can support them with collaborative divorce or with mediation, how's best for them to connect with you both.
Well, we have a website. It's actually in the process of being revamped a little bit, but it's weird WEIR law LLP.com. We post on social media as well. If listeners are interested in learning about mediation or about collaborative, there is a South Jersey collaborative practice group, which is called South Jersey Collaborative Divorce Professionals, which just rolls off the tongue. So we call it Better Way Divorce, and which also has a website. There's also the New Jersey Council Collaborative Practice Groups, of which our practice group is part. And so there's lots of online presence to learn more about it, or they can call and ask me about it, or ask Bruce about it. Bruce and I are both mediators. Bruce is one of the top mediators in the state. He's a past president of the NJAPM. He'll tell you about that. And there's lots and lots of information out there, either through either of us or some of the associations that we've been a part of.
And I'll share all the links for listeners, viewers. I'll share the links in the description so you can just click.
And you can share our email addresses if anybody has questions they want to email us. Happy to do it. Yeah, I mean, the best way is to look us up online on our website and get some more information.
We have articles and blogs, and we're available to talk about these things and do, in collaborative, there's a free process interview that can occur to teach people about what that process is like as a potential alternative dispute resolution technique.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
Lots of ways to connect with you, and anything that either one of you have coming up, or on behalf of the firm, any events or workshops that we should keep a lookout, or just check out the website to see what's on deck.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I don't have anything coming up in the next couple of months where I'm speaking or anything, but when I get a chance to do something like this that I think is really important and helpful, I'll jump on. And of course, there's also our Family Law and of Court, that Thomas S. Forkin Family Law American and of Court, which I'm always promoting as a great space for attorneys to meet with other like-minded attorneys and educate each other and support each other and mentor each other with the goal of professionalism. It's a great organization, and I encourage any new attorney in any practice to find a specialty in of court. It's one of the best career moves I ever made. So.
And you've been talking about, for as long as I've known you, for 20, close to 25 years, and you've been talking about that for a while. So I know that's important to you and holds a special place in your heart. I wish, as I'm sitting here, that I could just clone. There could be like a bunch of Bruces and Deenas out there. I think that the legal system would be so much different. And if I could just have a little Bruce on my shoulder being like, Courtney, don't send that email, or you're getting reactive,
Exactly.
Tone it down. That would be a gift.
There are more of us out there, though. There really are.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that there was the State Bar Association in New Jersey has a family law section, and the former chair of the family law section wrote an article in the monthly newsletter called the New Jersey Family Lawyer this recently that had all these statistics about lawyer dissatisfaction, about burnout, about the high level of percentage of burnout, of alcoholism, of drug addiction, of depression, anxiety, not just in family law, but just in lawyers in general. And the fact that if you look at our profession and you look at those statistics, and if you read those statistics, it was astounding to me how the level of dissatisfaction that lawyers have. And I hear this all the time from people. I say, could you talk to so-and-so? He's interested in going to law school, or she's in law school and she's interested in getting into family law or stuff like that. And I hear lawyers say, oh, you don't want them to talk to me. I'll talk them right out of it.
Yeah.
That's sad to me. That really is very sad for our profession in general, and in particular, the practice of family law. And I think part of it is related to the fact that there's all this stress involved, and what we're talking about, to me, can start to reduce all of that. People who can be more mindful, who can learn how to meditate or do deep breathing or yoga or something to help them alleviate all that stress and anxiety could really change the practice of law in the rest of the 21st century, as opposed to where it seems to be headed. Um, and I don't
Yeah.
know what the statistics are of people coming out of law school. I do believe that the trend is that this generation that's coming out of law school now is looking for more of a quality of life, work balance concept. I just don't know if the law can sustain what they're looking for.
Well,
And
it's nice to have the conversation though. Sorry to interrupt, Bruce.
yeah,
It's that because when we were young attorneys, this was not a conversation. It was about bill your hours, work weekends, prove yourself, make a mark, take on as much as you can, never take a vacation, and that's where burnout sets in.
Yeah.
And Bruce, you're a great example of, really turning your practice around into something that's fulfilling for you and beneficial to your
yeah,
clients. That's like, you're like my role model, for that, because that's it. And if I was talking to a brand new attorney, the advice I would give is don't fall down that rabbit hole of, losing yourself to this practice, or you will burn out. You have to make it as much of a priority as your client meetings and your deadlines to take care of yourself. That you have to make
yeah.
appointments and time, and set that time aside to do, go to the gym or go on a vacation or do something you like, whatever it is. Have some kind of other outlet.
Mhm.
I practice mindfulness and give yourself. You have to take care of yourself just like you take care of your clients, and that's really, really hard, especially for new attorneys to learn. But if you don't learn that, you absolutely are going to burn out, and then you're no good to your clients.
So one of these statistics was that 28% of the lawyers surveyed said they considered leaving the profession of law. To
Yeah.
me, that is astronomical. Like that shocked me.
Well,
Uh,
that was me 10 years ago. I was running. I
mhm.
wanted to do anything but practice. I said, I'm going to go work at Starbucks and serve people coffee where I can make people smile and they'll like me. It's not going to be so adversarial. I mean, I guess it could be if you serve their coffee right. But all kidding aside, and Deena, I'm going to be respectful of your time because I know you have another call in 3 minutes, but that was my experience, Bruce. I hit a point of burnout and I knew I couldn't sustain that way of living. I couldn't do a good job for my attorneys. I couldn't be present and a good mom for my children or present for my husband. So I learned mindfulness, and I will honestly say that is what allowed me not to get rid of the stressors that are inherent in the field of law, but to see how
Right.
I was relating to them, to see what wasn't serving me, and to learn how to take better care of myself, to draw those boundaries. And so it bought me another 10 years of working in a really difficult type of law, being a litigator, dealing with uncertainty, dealing with difficult adversaries. But we can find ways to support ourselves in work that can be really challenging. And in doing so, we can find more fulfillment, which you both demonstrate in the
Exactly.
lives that you're living. So I really appreciate both of you being here together with me. It's always nice to be back together. And I look forward to keeping in touch and sharing this with so many others out there.
Well, thanks
Thanks
for
for having
having
us,
us.
Courtney.
Yeah, this
My
was great. Always
pleasure.
great to see you.
Likewise. Hope to bump into you maybe in the neighborhood. And have a great weekend
You
and
too.
take the best of care.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
Courtney.
Be well.
You will.